Okay, so that guest host position from episode 17 finally got claimed by a GameShowGarbage. Wait, I know that guy. I remember him from that Mega Man marathon. Let me see if I can get a hold of him.
Shop teardrop. How glorious. Well, if that's over, I think it's time to go back to the video power script. Hello?
Hey Sigma, it's me, Octrinity, from the Mega Man marathon. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm alright. I saw you found that hidden video. Thanks for doing so. I was going nuts hoping someone would find it.
Oh, no problem. I was also thinking about what video game series we should do.
Let me guess. It's gonna be something game show related, right?
You know what? It gets to that point in time where I get sick and tired of talking about game shows. I kind of start to repeat myself.
And you know, I already did the Mega Man games, especially your favorites, the Zero.
Mention the word Rod and something bad will happen. Besides, me and my girlfriend are really addicted to the X and Y games right now, so I figured we'd do Pokemon instead.
Pokemon, huh? Yeah, I can do that, sure. How do you want to go about this, though?
Essentially, I'm thinking about let's just do the first two games of each gen.
Sounds logical to me. Let's do this. Go ahead, guys. Let's get started.
Gaming reviews done quick. A wild review appears. It's the 1-minute rundown and the 30-second opinion. I'm Octrinity, your host, and I like shorts. They're comfy and easy to wear.
And I'm Sigma, an electric Pokemon saved me during the war.
And this time we're both running down Pokemon. In these games, you take the role of a Pokemon trainer who battles his opponents by catching animals and monsters and having them do the dirty work for you. The games generally run off storylines with two goals. First, to become the greatest trainer in the region, and second, to stop an evil team from accomplishing their goal that inevitably involves misusing Pokemon. What's more unusual about these games is the social experience. Not only can you take your team up against your friends, but you can also trade Pokemon with them, and frequently doing so is required to find everything. These games have generally been released in pairs with almost equal content aside from the distribution of Pokemon, so we're reviewing 6 generations here. Ready? While I generally like Pokemon games, I never got into it as much as several other people I know, and I think that's more of a personal preference than anything. I feel like the one-on-one format with only 4 abilities per Pokemon is more limiting than strategic. Grinding them to catch them all gets a little old by the end of the game, and the social element got lost to me when everyone's working at different paces. But with Pokemon Red and Blue, I feel like, memorable and groundbreaking as it was, the games got left behind pretty harshly simply on the way of having better sequels. Its simplicity makes a good entry point into this series, and its lack of descriptions for items and abilities, as well as the limited item bag and Pokemon storage box space, makes it just the opposite. And sure, 150 Pokemon split across 15 types, including hybrids, is a lot, but there's a lot of room for variety that was missed. Good luck finding a Grass-type Pokemon that's not also a Poison-type, for example, and some types just don't fare well in the first place in the game's large elemental hierarchy. Sure, it's a good game, but given how the series evolved, this feels a bit unimpressive by comparison.
While I do concur that the elemental typing of this game and other bugs do hinder my enjoyment of the game, that doesn't mean it's not good. The ability to train Pokemon like they were Donruss or Fleer cards and being able to care for them makes things better to catch them all. I also want to take this time to question those who think this gen was the best, i.e. the Gen 1ers. I have one thing to say that completely counters your argument. Dear God, the Pokemon themselves look terrible. Half of them look like they were slapped together without care. In short, shut up!
Pokemon's one of those series that doesn't change its fundamental gameplay much, to the point that your opinion of each game won't vary too much. But this one does add a lot. About 100 new Pokemon, more variety in the Pokemon themselves and their attacks, Dark and Steel types added, descriptions on almost everything, the ability for Pokemon to hold items to improve certain skills or automatically consume them on certain conditions, a real-time clock that changes what you'll encounter based on when you're playing, a special stat split into separate attack and defense stats, Pokemon having gender and being able to reproduce, a second quest added after becoming a Pokemon Grandmaster, and well, that's about it, but really, those are all good changes. In terms of the one-player campaign, the world seems better organized, so you'll be wandering around for your next objective a bit less, and side material feels like it gets introduced a lot sooner. but I kinda doubt this is gonna bring in new fans, as the main gameplay and story is pretty much the same. But if you like the first set of games and are hungry for more, this game is definitely relevant to your interests.
This is the gen that I played a lot. It's my favorite out of all of them. I love the story of the leftover Team Rocket, and them actually causing chaos rather than being jobbers lower than the Gambler. And the overarching exploration of both Johto and Kanto makes the game worth playing more, especially to fight against Red in the end. Not to mention, this is my favorite final battle music of any Pokemon game. I disagree with Tom on this being a game that will bring in new fans. If you want to show off what Pokemon is all about, show them this. Everything is perfect. Just don't show them Whitney or they'll take a death.
With the amount of positive changes made last time, all of which are carried over in some form, this one feels like a bit of a disappointment simply because they didn't include as much new stuff, and only feels marginally better overall. Sure, the Pokemon roster is bigger again, and giving each Pokemon a passive ability is certainly a plus, and considering very few of these abilities are reused between Pokemon, there's even more incentive to catch as many as you can. There's also contests resembling a dog show, which is a fun side game more than anything. The point it feels like they most marketed here is the addition of 2-on-2 battles, which is silly because they're used so sparingly, maybe 20 times during the entire game. Never mind that they haven't been an innovation in the genre since 1987. I see some further attempts at social play that are probably going to waste now simply because of the game's age, but they're explained so poorly I never figured out why I should bother with them in the first place. I don't really like the level design as much, which feels like they went a little trigger-happy with using moves that require an HM, but this is a step up with the battles.
While I do admire what they were going for this game with the 2-on-2 battles, the overabundance of using Surf really drained me. Especially when it comes to having to use both Waterfall and Dive to get through the later parts of the game. What disappointed me about this game is the music wasn't that great. The rest of the game, that was spot on. I love the battling and fixing of the types, and new Pokemon were fantastic. I still love Credillia and Wailord to this date. It's great, but not as great as Gen 2 was.
Diamond and Pearl have the usual increase in size, but make one fundamental and well-needed change in that abilities are categorized individually as physical or special attacks rather than being automatically determined based on type. The use of the second screen to display extra information is nice, and while it's been taken down now, a move to online battling and trading is welcome. Unfortunately, I can't really say as much about the rest of the game. The variety in the Pokemon doesn't seem there, with the major types that previously were pretty common barely represented here. Contests don't feel worth doing anymore, and somehow the game managed to feel slower paced in almost every possible sense. To be honest, this one excited me at the beginning, then felt like it was becoming tedious and was just trying to get it over with by the end. I'm not usually one to claim a game is bad because it's too similar to the last one, but in a game that's unlikely to be finished in less than 24 hours, it seems like a legitimate complaint. So what I feel like I ended up with was a Pokemon game that improved the battle system significantly, but otherwise was the same old thing.
While the stat changes were nice, everything else just bored me to death. The new Pokemon aren't as amazing as new ones from Gen 3, and the main bad guy group this time around is really disappointing. Team Galactic is nothing more than a rehash of Aqua and Magma, but just replace World with Galaxy and you got the same thing. It also doesn't help matters that the new graphics for this game look worse than the previous gen. There are no new story concepts either. This was the only gen I voluntarily didn't play all the way through, and to be frank, this gen is worth skipping anyways.
Black and White feels like they tried to repaint the series without actually changing the core gameplay much. For one, old Pokemon are completely absent until after the main game is finished, but with a few exceptions, it doesn't feel too much like they just tried reskinning old Pokemon. There also seems to be a much bigger focus on the story, which manages to interlink both the Pokemon Master and Villain team plot, which pays off because it's far more interesting than any of the early games. Feels like Pokemon level up and learn new abilities much faster here, so the pace of the game feels quicker, helped out by TMs, those items that teach new abilities being reusable, and HM techniques are barely needed on the field outside of optional material. 3-on-3 matches are possible, not that they have much place in the main game either, but 2-on-2 at least seems common enough to stop being a novelty. Seasons change every real-time month, making small changes to the map, which will probably annoy obsessive treasure collectors, but otherwise seems cool. Again, no huge changes in the end, not enough to make me a die-hard fan, but a serious step up from last time.
I'm currently playing Black 1 after playing Black 2, and to be frank, this is not much of an upgrade for Gen 4, except for what Tom said in the story. I'm conflicted on what story is better, this one or Gen 2, and that's the game's high point. The graphics are slightly better than Gen 4, and the 3-on-3 battles did wear out on me pretty quickly. Honestly, aside from that, there's nothing new here. Still worth a play just for the amazingness that is Burbank's gym.
The most obvious change here is visual, as Pokemon are much more animated this time around and you can customize your character's appearance. The game also makes an attempt to make concepts like effort values that were hidden and generally only used by the competitive scene more accessible, but it's done mostly through minigames that are more tedious than fun. I don't really like the Horde battles though, as they just feel unnecessarily slow, but the idea of tossing your friends' gameplay bonuses via O-Powers is pretty cool. And of course Mega Evolution, a free action that temporarily powers up one of your Pokemon, honestly feels like it's just for show, as the effect usually isn't all that noticeable, but it's more good than bad. The Pokemon you'll find here are mostly older ones, as if they wanted to evoke nostalgia or fan service instead of spending time coming up with new material, but for the most part they chose their favorites well, and the number you'll find is ridiculously high. Pokemon are barely repeated in different locations. I'm guessing at this point they knew their audience well enough to know what to change, what to keep, and what to call back, and if so, they called it correctly.
This gym brought me back into the fold, and I absolutely dig the Fairy type. It balances out the overpowerness of the Dragon type and makes the Steel type more of a challenge. Not only that, the story gets to be more than most, that you really do feel like you have a bond between your friends and your Pokemon. Not to mention, the Mega Evolutions are amazing. Mega Blaziken and Mega Mawile look great, while Mega Gyarados looks like a callback to a Team Rocket submarine from the anime. Nevertheless, this game helped me wash out the bad taste that Gen 4 left in my mouth.
Alright, I'm done trying to catch them all, because if I do, we're going to be here all day. See, the first 4 generations had a third version that included some mostly cosmetic additions or a bonus area, while Gen 5 have new games entirely that just happen to use the same Pokemon. The first 2 generations also have full-blown remakes, with the 3rd gen announced to have one later this year. And of course that's not getting into the many spin-offs. A franchise as successful as this one certainly attracted some imitators as well, with Digimon, Bakugan, and Monster Rancher being perceived as some of the more well-known ones. But gameplay-wise, certain games out of the Shin Megami Tensei series or Dragon Quest Monsters might be closer to what you're expecting. Check back soon for the next episode of 1 Minute Rundown. Since this was a series that stayed pretty consistent throughout, next time I'll show you one that changes styles completely every few games. Until then, remember, you gotta catch 'em all.
Oh, before I go, I left you a small present that might be useful for your next video.
Oh yeah? What is it? Is it a triple rod?
No, it's not a triple rod. It's also not a chain rod or a recoil rod or a super rod or a Roddy action figure or an inanimate carbon rod, and it certainly the hell isn't Roddy Piper either.
Well then, what is it?
You'll just have to open and find out on the next episode. I'm out of here. Take care.
Alright, Sigma left already, right? Okay, yeah. You know what? Let me see what's in this box he left me then.
Tom, there's a time and a place for everything, but not now.
Well, I guess I'm not finding out what's in the box then.